We are back here at Boom and Bust. Our guest is Benjamin Bergen. He is the president of the Council of Canadian Innovators. So before the break, I kind of laid the table out for you, Benjamin, that our previous guest, Rick Perkins, was intimating that perhaps we have too many of these corporate programs that are not doing enough good, and maybe we just lower everybody's taxes and see how that works. Any response to that?
Yeah. So, first things first, Rick and I have met many times over the years and, often find ourselves in sort of violent agreement on many things. So, if you're looking for fireworks from me in terms of disagreeing with some of the, Rick's thoughts, apologies, and we'll be able to help you out there. But let's dive into a little bit of it because I think what Rick is saying has a lot of value, right? There is a tremendous amount of money that the government is spending on sort of an alphabet soup of different types of programs. And given, the economic constraints we find ourselves, we got to make sure that every dollar that the government is spending of our hard payers' money is generating returns, right? And when you look at a lot of instances, you're not seeing that type of economic opportunity. So,
Yeah.
for us, we definitely think there needs to be a re-examining of how the government is allocating these types of dollars. I think on the lowering of taxation piece, the big thing there that we've got to watch is obviously the delta between Canada and the US, and making sure that we are tax competitive. Lower taxes doesn't necessarily lead to a higher innovation outputs. You can look at some of the Nordic countries to see that they have tremendous innovation economies, obviously with high taxes. So that's not the only thing that's required. Obviously, it helps and it keeps things like investors and entrepreneurs and highly skilled workers, here in Canada if we are tax competitive, because Lord knows we're not competitive when it comes to the weather,
Right.
and so we got to watch that with the United States. What I would say on sort of looking at government spend, I think the big piece that I would push here is, are you supporting domestic players? So when, we see the government announce $40 million for Ericsson in the Canada, Ottawa area for, manufacturing, those dollars are ultimately making it more difficult for some of our semiconductor companies here in this country to be
Right.
able to compete, right? And so what I would really say that there should be, complete overhaul is looking at where's the money flowing and is it actually leading to the outputs that we want as a country? And if it's not, then looking at putting on the chopping block, I would say is pretty high on that list.
Gotcha. Oh, that makes perfect sense. Um, you've also emphasized, maybe it's with the Shield website rather than the Council of Canadian Innovators, but this idea of sovereign economic development. I think you've alluded to that today as well. Can you just elaborate on that process a little bit for our
Yeah,
viewers? Yeah.
for sure, for sure. So, look, I think the moment that we find ourselves in, if you don't have mechanisms of economic prosperity or capacities for the 21st century, your sovereignty begins to erode. So let's take an area like semiconductors. If Canada doesn't have a sufficient semiconductor industry that's domestically headquartered, our ability to participate in the future economy will actually be determinant upon other jurisdictions and other governments in other countries. And as we're currently experiencing, a government that we were very friendly with for over the last hundred and how many years, we sort of find ourselves awaking to a very different reality.
Right.
So on something like semiconductors, making sure that we're participating not just in the supply chain, but actually the value chain of wealth will be, really critical. So, you know, having a sort of laissez-faire approach around allowing, the economy to grow and not realizing that there's certain sectors we need to take care of in order to be sovereign will be critical. And that applies to everything from defense to energy to semiconductors. And we can look at some examples of really good countries that have figured this out. Look at the Netherlands, relatively small country in the grand scheme of things.
Yes.
9% of semiconductor capacity is determined in the Netherlands. And their lithography machine that they create was so, or is viewed as so critical that the president of the United States had to go there twice to politely ask them not to sell it to the Chinese, as we look at trying to figure out kind of how the world around the semiconductor economy is playing out. So I think Canada's got to figure out some ways to get into these types of value chains in order for us to secure ourselves. Because if we have things that the world wants to buy, they'll buy them regardless of tariffs.
Indeed. Benjamin, we're going to take another brief break. We'll be back with you with our final segment after these messages.